Welcome to part 1 of my story, Envirian, a Fable for Conservatives the World Over by Joanna Piccioni Hurley. Copyright 2016, all rights reserved by the author in accordance with the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976. This video will be 15 minutes long. A German Lutheran pastor and anti-Nazi dissident who was executed for his fight against Hitler during World War II, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, said this: "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." I, Joanna Piccioni Hurley, say this: not to vote when liberty and the Constitution hang in the balance is silence in the face of oppression, and yes, evil. And not to vote is to vote. This book is a work of fiction. It is a parody of the nomination and election process of the November 2016 United States presidential election. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. None of the actions, motives, desires, or statements of the characters are meant to indicate actions, motives, or desires or statements of actual persons. Although the general character of the nomination and election process of 2016 is represented in this book, as any parody intends to do, except for a few paraphrased statements by Republican nominees Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, this book is entirely fictional. Preface: Envirian, a Fable for Conservatives the World Over. It is 1830, and Envirian Island is home to the great nation of Envirian, the most free, the most productive, and the happiest nation in the world. Its free enterprise system of government, its low taxes, and its industrious and creative people have built a nation where everything can be found in abundance. Homegrown products of all kinds are available to the citizens of this blessed island nation. Established 238 years ago, the Envirian Islanders are unsuspecting when a tiny enemy sets foot on their island. Will farmers Tommy Bump and Jed True and rancher Senor Smarto Rodeo be able to fight this enemy and overcome the devastation it could cause on their island? In which direction will the political winds blow now that politics have become involved in the problem? Will conservatism triumph over the liberal environmentalists? Or will this tiny enemy succeed in destroying the happiness of this great nation? A momentous lesson is about to be learned by the islanders of Envirian, a lesson learned that can benefit us all. If you are a conservative, you must read Envirian, a Fable for Conservatives the World Over. From My Country 'Tis of Thee, American Hymn, text Samuel F. Smith. Our Father's God, to Thee, author of liberty, to Thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by Thy might, great God our King. Thank you to yahoo.com for commercially available art and images. More thanks on the last page. Table of Contents. Preface. Envirian Island Map. Envirian Island Map Orientation. Chapter 1. Envirian Island and the Might. Chapter 2, The Meeting. Chapter 3, The President, Mayor, and his Secretary make plans. Chapter 4, The City Council Legislature holds hearings. Chapter 5, The Ruling Causes Division. Chapter 6, The City Council Legislature holds another hearing. Chapter 7, As divisions grow, the race for President-Mayor begins. Chapter 8, The Nomination, Bill Basic, and the Stay-at-Home Movement. Chapter 9, The Election. Chapter 10, The Exodus, Answered Prayers, and the Reunion. Old Envirian text carved into the Great Stone of Christoron. Questions for review, Boudreaux and Thibodeau in 2016. References, Acknowledgments. And here we have Envirian Island Map, the home of the great nation of Envirian. Going clockwise, starting in the north at the Red Poppy Hills and the hamlet of Mariana are the northeastern Kirkland farmlands and the home of farmer Jed True. Directly east on the island is Envirian City and beautiful Nana Bay. Below are the village green, bump golf course, and sparkling Lake Mary May. Going south, we find the farm and estate of Tommy Bump and the Bluebell Hills. The entire south is the Natalian Southlands, where there are many large farms. Above center, we have the Wilmalian Forest and the Mountains of Valor. The northwest has the Pachoni Plains and ranch lands, where many large ranches produce savory meats for the island nation of Envirian. There in the north is Senor Smarto Rodeo's ranch, Rodeo Lake, and the misty river that flows from the Mountains of Valor out to the sea. Thus is the island nation of Envirian found in the year 1830, where many women love freedom and their families and enjoying the fruits of their labors. And now we come to Chapter 1, Envirian Island and the Mite. Once upon a time, actually it was in the year 1830, there was a small nation in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a very large island called Envirian. The island had one major city that was called, naturally, Envirian City. The rest of the island was populated by small hamlets that served the many farmers, ranchers, and fishermen of Envirian Nation. And there we see a picture of Envirian City. For 238 years, the inhabitants of Envirian City had lived in harmony with the growers, ranchers, and fishermen of the hamlets. While the hamlets used excellent conservative techniques to produce food products which fed the entire island, the city's blacksmiths, woodworkers, and leatherworkers produced tools, tackle, and equipment of all sorts to assist the growers, ranchers, and fishermen. Talented city tailors, knitters, and weavers created useful clothing that kept these food producers warm and dry as they planted and harvested the fields, worked the ranches, and fished the seas. Not only did everyone work in harmony together, but nature itself seemed bent on enhancing the peace of this lovely nation, for Envirian was situated at the perfect latitude for the mildest winters, the breeziest summers, and of course spring and autumn were perfectly temperate. Envirian Island was the happiest, most productive nation in the world. All of the world looked to it as an example of how hard-working, smart people in a free enterprise system of government can produce the quantity and quality of products that provide for the nation's inhabitants in abundance. Envirian Nation even provided for those less fortunate who through illness or some misfortune were unable to work. Thus no one could find fault with this generous nation, least of all the citizens themselves. In the 239th year of the establishment of this lovely nation, a subtle enemy arrived on the island. It came on one of the many ships that sailed to Envirian City's port to trade with them. It was very, very tiny and brown, with little yellow legs and a reddish mouth that looked more like a beak. It was a bug, and none of its kind had ever before set foot on Envirian Island. And there's a picture of a brown wheat mite. Around the same time that the bug arrived on the island, there began to be changes in the wheat, alfalfa, and barley crops. At first, only a few farmers noticed a change in their production of barley. Then a few more noticed a reduction in their wheat production. The wheat seemed more sparse, their stems weaker, and there were gray areas running through the blades. In every field where these subtle changes were taking place, the tiny brown bug with the yellow legs and pointy red beak could be found on the stems and leaves of the alfalfa, wheat, and barley, sucking the cellular sap out of these plants with its needle-like snout. This bug was a mite, and it was only as big as the period at the end of this sentence. But its numbers were legion, and its devastation of the crops was ensured if nothing was done to stop it. The farmers were flummoxed and perplexed, bothered and bewildered. What were they to do? So they gathered together for a meeting on the subject. Two farmers whose grandparents were refugees from a distant land called Acadie, a French-speaking settlement, spoke first. They spoke with a different kind of French accent. At the meeting, Farmer Boudreau the elder raised his hand and began to speak. Mes amis, y'all know me and Farmer Thibodeau the younger real good. We've always been straight up with you. But I have to say, we ain't never seen such a bug as this little wee one in all the many years that we have farmed on Envirian Island. Mais yeah, said Thibodeau. Them there bugs are a riddle to be deciphered. Otherwise, our barley production is gonna be real pilfered, and our wheat crop is bound to be wheat and wilted. Then, out of the blue, Farmer Tommy Bump said, I have the solution, and with it we can win this battle of the bugs and just keep winning and winning. We will make Envirian farms great again. All the farmers listened as Bump related his successful experiences killing bugs similar to this type. He said, On my farmland up near the bluebell-covered hills are long veins of chalky yellow soil. The soil from these veins breaks up into a soft powder when you put it in a burlap sack and stomp on it. I have noticed that by sprinkling this powder on my wheat crop, any small bugs will die, but the wheat does just fine. Not to be outdone, Farmer Jed True raised his hand and shouted, Farmer Bump is correct, but I find that the orange earth under the red poppy-covered hills up north by the Misty River is even better powdery soil for killing off these disgusting bugs that will destroy our way of life if we let this continue. Some of the farmers who knew and liked Jed True shouted support for Jed's plan. Bump began to argue that his yellow powder was best, while True claimed his orange powder was superior. Look, True, said Bump, I'm not putting orange powder on my crops. My yellow works just fine. Bump, it is orange because it's mixed with the red clay from the silty soil near the Misty River, but that is what gives it superior power to kill bugs. The crowd behind True nodded in agreement. Well, I'll be tarred and feathered before I'll walk in from my fields after spreading it, looking like an orange poppy flower, said Bump. Bump's supporters howled with laughter and rallied behind him. Neither Bump nor True knew it, but their competitive argument portended momentous future events and great changes to come on Envirian Island. As the bugs began to spread over the island's farmland, so did the farmers spread the powder over their crops. In the Natalian Southlands, where there were many large farms, farmers spread the yellow powder, while the farmers on the north side in the Kirkland farmlands spread the orange powder. They simply stuffed a long, loosely knitted sock with the powder. Then as they walked past each row of wheat, alfalfa, or barley, they tapped the sock against their pant leg. Like this, they were able to disperse the powder onto their crops and onto the soil. The powders worked beautifully, and most of the mites were killed. By harvest time, there were large bumper crops of alfalfa, wheat, barley, and every variety of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and grains. The farmers rejoiced, for they realized that the powders were also good fertilizer for their crops. This mite could have devastated their crops, but through their hard work and ingenuity, they could celebrate a bountiful harvest, and celebrate they did with much dancing and revelry. Thank you for listening. This concludes Part 1 of Envirian, a fable for conservatives the world over. On YouTube, look for Envirian, a fable for conservatives, Part 2, Chapters 2 and 3. It will be about 30 minutes long. Thank you for listening. You may contact Joanna Hurley at joannaforfreedom@gmail.com. That's Joanna, F-O-R, freedom@gmail.com. Also look for Part 3, Chapters 4 through 6, Part 4, Chapters 7 through 8, and Part 5, Chapters 9 and 10, and the conclusion of my story. Part 6 includes questions for review, references, acknowledgments, and a funny story about Boudreau and Thibodeau in 2016. Don't forget to vote for conservative leaders Who can win?